Hi, everyone. Welcome to Influencing on Camera, the podcast. I am here with my good friend, Dave Kramer. How's it going?
Good. Great to see you.
So you and I have like a weird history, but I like to say this way. You are the first person that ever gave me actual helpful advice for my business.
Well, that's a nice thing to say.
Well, you know how when you start a business, like everyone has these ideas for you and you don't know really which direction to go. And it was just, you gave us some really great pointers. You were the first person to say, put a sizzle reel on your website. And
well, thank you.
You're right. Those work so well. How do you kind of feel about sizzle reels overall?
Oh, I think it's so important because the internet ADD that we experience right now with people, like they lose their attention so quickly, having something that's really hot and spicy and interesting, and actually comes from my background back in California. I really had a passion for doing TV commercials and for doing music videos. And both of those are timed events. TV commercial spot is usually 30 seconds. And a music video can only last as long as the song. And so I had to learn how to edit only the hottest parts of what I had collected. And it really forces you, especially when you're in a 30-second spot, to get the best cuts and to make it as interesting as possible.
You know, and that's so true. And you have great musicality, at least in the dance world, we call it musicality, where you have a real feel for like the rhythm. And for those of you who may not know quite what we're talking about, Dave has a great sizzle reel on his website. So I will make sure we put that in the comments so you can click on that and get right to it. But Dave's got a lot of experience. He's doing this whole thing of like Dave Talks Business. And let's chat about that really fast. What does that mean?
Well, kind of like what you were saying, I've been coaching my friends who are in business for as long as I can remember, and I never really made it an actual business or an actual thing. It's just something I kind of did on the side. And it really comes from a deep down passion that I have for small business. It's kind of like when you see somebody doing something that's not quite up to snuff, you want to help them out, right? So that's just what I've been doing. And I've had a lot of my friends, including you, tell me, you really should do this more professionally, more regularly. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll get to it later. And so I've been kicking this idea around for the last 4 years. And finally, January 1st of 2021, I was just like, I got to do this now. And even if my video quality isn't quite up to snuff and if my audio is not quite there, I just have to start because I know I can always improve from that point forward. So January 1st, launched my first video on YouTube.
People say that, you had a hesitation, you didn't want to do it right away. I know mine is A, I don't like to be on camera. B, I think I sound like a Muppet and, my voice quality. And C, I'm an introvert. I'm a hardcore introvert. And I'm sure you hear the same thing where people are like, oh, but I see you on all these TV shows and these speaking events. Are you sure you're an introvert? I'm like, yeah, I think I know what I am. Was that your condition? I mean, what was going on with that?
As far as why I was procrastinating?
Yeah. Why were you totally into it?
One is I have so much experience being behind the camera and so little experience being in front of the camera. And I know you know what I'm talking about.
I do. Yes.
Because you're trying to self-direct yourself and trying to check the lighting. And that's not your responsibility right now. Right now, you're in front of the camera. You're just supposed to concentrate on the content and what you're trying to get across. So that's actually been my struggle. And just to get over it, it's just like jumping into the cold pool. You just got to do it. So that's what I did.
Oh, that's so brave. And I think the cold pool is the perfect analogy for that. So you obviously do a lot of stuff with business, but how can you keep your customers from pulling you in 10 different directions? Because you're such an altruistic person. You take such good care of your customers. How do you keep them from directing you?
Yeah, exactly. This is a question that I actually deal with a lot with the clients that I'm coaching right now. And it really comes down to setting your boundaries, right? And so one of the things you want to do is have policies for your business that dictate what you will do and what you won't do. And a lot of times this comes into play with the packages that you offer for your services or your product. You'll always have that client that'll say, can't you just adjust this? Or can't you just give me that? And as soon as you hear those words, can't you just, you got to be thinking, nope. Nope, they're trying to get me out of my box. You got to keep them in the box. Another thing that's really common is rush orders, right? People call you and they go, I need this tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a fee for that, by the way.
Yeah,
If you ask me to rush a
exactly.
video, there is a rush fee.
Yep, exactly. So what it really comes down to is who is in control. And that's kind of something that I'm repeating like a mantra over and over again to my clients. Who is in control? Sometimes they'll tell me, my employees aren't doing what I'm saying, and I'm asking them repeatedly, and I say, who is in control? Or they say, my customers are making me go here and making me drive across town and making me stay late after work to get this project done for them. And I say, who is in control? The whole reason you
Truth.
started your business was because you wanted to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden we lose that. So my advice is to have good, strong company policies and SOPs. And there's even times when I have broken my policies, and every time I do, it
Yeah.
just takes forever, costs me a fortune. The customer's not
Yes.
happy with the product. You
Yes.
fall outside of your comfort zone and what you're good at. So it's really something to pay attention to.
And I think that that's so true. I mean, I know that in my experience, the ones that are the most like, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Turn out to be the worst customers and the ones that are the most unappreciative of you. I mean, how do you deal with those type of people that, I mean, let's call it, I don't want to say firing a client, but saying that it's not a good fit. How do you do that gently? It's like breaking up with somebody, you know?
Right. It really is. And, it kind of goes to that 80-20 rule. 80% of your customers are going to give you no grief, and the other 20% are. So you want to really try to pre-screen people up front. So as you're having a conversation with them, listen for some of those keywords. Another thing that's very comparable to the dating world would be to ask how your relationship went before with the person that you were in a relationship with before. So I've asked questions. I've had somebody come to me and say, I'm leaving the last company because they were horrible and they wouldn't do what I needed and they wouldn't respond to my phone calls. And you got to ask yourself, why was that?
Yeah.
It might be an indicator.
Yeah, it's when people say like my computer's always broken, my computer never works. Like I've been through 3 computers. I'm like, is it the computer or is it user error? And it kind of sounds like the same thing because you do a very customizable, but it also use a lot of automation, which I really like because that allows you to put your full time and effort into I don't want to call it the squeaky wheel, but the things that need your attention right away. How did you come up with that idea?
Well, I'm all about automation and optimization of all systems. And so even when I'm working with my staff, I'm looking for inefficiencies. They've gotten used to it. A lot of times I'll just go into the room where they're working and I'll just kind of stand behind them and I'm kind of looking like this. And I'm just noticing things in the room, like if their chair isn't tall enough, if they need a bigger like mouse pad or something like that. If there's any inefficiencies or they're having to reach all the way across the desk to get to something, I'm always looking for ways to make things easier so my team is more comfortable.
And that's really one of those detail-oriented things that you get out of certain types of personalities, where it can also be to a detriment, where you just don't get things done, or you're like, oh, it's not right. Let me just do a couple more revisions, blah, blah, blah. And I honestly, if I worked for you, I think that I'd find that to be really intimidating to have you over my shoulder. How do you do it kindly without making them feel like they're, under a microscope?
Well, I certainly don't stand over their shoulder. I stand as far away as possible. And like I said, they kind of gotten used to it. Like I'll come in and I'll ask them and I'll say, do you need a different kind of a mouse, or is that chair comfortable for you? Things like that. So they know that I'm doing it for their benefit, as opposed to trying to find something that they're doing wrong. It's not that at all. It's usually a collaborative thing where I'm asking them, hey, is that difficult for you? Do you think there's a better way we can do that? Because that's something that I think business owners don't typically spend enough time on. Is when you outsource something to someone else, they're in the trenches and they're doing that job. And so they know it better than you do. And they might realize, man, if I had a tool that was shaped this way, I'd be able to do this a little better. But they're intimidated. They don't feel like they can say that to you. So I think it's important to open those communications up and let them know, hey, if there's anything we can do to make your job easier or faster, especially in the software world. I mean, I've had my team recommend to me all kinds of different softwares that I had never heard of that would accomplish things that I had tasked them to do manually. So it saves the company time and money.
And when you're talking about efficiencies there, it's not, I mean, of course, we want people to be happy, but it's also saving you money, which is
Exactly.
awesome. And I like this thing because you're, of course, really good at math. I think it's very well known by now on my channel that I'm not. But one of the things that you do with your people is you really work on retention because it takes so much more time and resources and money to train a new person. How would you explain that to a business owner that's just, hiring for the first time or has a lot of turnover and they don't know why?
Right. Yeah. Well, I would ask them, I'd say, how long did it take you to train that person? And then I would actually go through and calculate, because not only is it taking time out of that business owner's day, it's also, they're also paying the hours to that staff member
Right.
to be trained for a week and then decide they're going to leave because they don't like the job. So you can add up all the time that the business owner is spending and then all the payroll that's going out to that person for that first week. And it is a significant cost. Absolutely.
It's a
But
lot.
there's something else with that I recommend is whenever you have a team member who is operating at a great level and they know more than you do about your business and your customers, unfortunately, things happen. They might call you one day and say, I have to move out of town, or they might call you from the hospital and say, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. So we have to plan for these things as business owners. And while they're there and while they're doing such an excellent job for us, we've got to get them to document those processes. And so those are known as standard operating procedures. And if you have all of that documented, if they do have to be out of town for a few weeks, you can step right into their role, or you can bring someone else in and have them take over right where that person left off and understand exactly what the steps are to get things done. It is critical.
That's such great advice. And I really appreciate you just being like, this is how I do it. This is how I've done it. And this is what's been working for us. And just giving people a different perspective on, what they can do, what they have opportunities for. So we talked about communicating with your team. How do you communicate with your customers? I mean, everyone says, do X amount of touches or, stay up with them, comment on things on Facebook. What do you do to stay in communication?
Yeah, there's so many different communication methods out there now. It is completely overwhelming.
It is.
And I just literally have refused to communicate on certain platforms for my own sanity. So
really?
I try to keep it down to a few that are going to be kind of more popular. So I'll give you one example. It's going to probably shock you. It's something that I tell every customer. I say, we do not take phone calls.
Yep.
Deal with it. We don't take phone calls. So if they call us, there is a recorded message that says, this is a text messaging number only. Go ahead and send us a text message at the same number. And when they send a text, we can respond right back to them. So the problem that we found when we had people calling in was they would inevitably want to share their computer screen with us to show us the problem that they were experiencing.
Right.
And we can't do that over the phone. So it's kind of wasting everybody's time for you to call me. And then we talk about how you need to be in front of your computer. And then you go to your computer and then we have to give you a Zoom code and then it doesn't work. And then, the thing where they're on the phone and then they connect on Zoom and the audio feedback.
Yes. Oh, it's the worst.
A whole mess. It takes forever. So what we did was we just incorporated a Zoom button right into the software. So if they need help, they click it, boom, they're in Zoom, and it just streamlined the whole process. So
I really like that.
Also, for our company, if somebody wants to email us, that's really not a good way to get support either, because we need to see your computer screen. So we took all of these communication methods and we've kind of redirected people to starting Zoom calls where we can see their screen and we can help them as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Now, one of the things I like about your text message thing, and the reason I do when people want to change their videos and stuff, I'm like, send me an email. Don't call me. Don't tell me over the phone, is that I also have a record of when they sent it, what's going on, what they requested. So that way, if there's ever miscommunication, I can bring up that record and say, hey, these are the things you requested. This is the date you requested them on. Where are we missing this information? And that way it puts the accountability back on them as well. And so that's another reason I don't take phone calls unless I absolutely have to. You better be missing a limb or something and you need me to come get you and your other emergency contact didn't answer. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
My husband didn't answer. Let me call my videographer, but you kind of know what I mean. So
Yeah,
how
we
that
live in
goes.
a very reactionary society. I think the more technology has made things accessible for us, it's caused people to be so reactionary and not
Hmm.
taking the time to plan things ahead. And so, you may have had that client that texts you and says, "Oh yeah, one more thing, I need this." And then
Hmm.
5 seconds later, "Oh, and I forgot, there's something else." And then,
Right.
5 minutes later, "Oh, and then one more thing, can you do this too?" That you can tell they're being reactionary as opposed to just taking a moment and kind of taking some silence and some woosah and just like figure out what
Think
it
it
is that
through.
you need and then make one communication about that. And so, like you said, if you have that track record, they've forgotten what they asked for the day before. So there's just
Yes.
no way that they're going to remember.
That's so true. And you're right, people are reactionary. And I think that comes down to a couple of things because people like you and myself, with that detail oriented thing, we also tend to plan like way in advance. Like we planned this recording, this podcast, I think back in October of last year. You know what I mean? Like that's how some people work. And that's, it's a good and bad thing when you have your calendar full like that. It also shows that supply and demand. And when we're talking about these people being super busy or people like you that have all this stuff going on, how do you decide when you should raise your prices? Is it based off the economy, whether or not minimum wage is a certain amount, whether how busy you are? What determines the price increase?
Yeah, it's if you look at basic economics, there's the law of supply and demand. And the way it goes is that as there's an increase in supply, demand goes down. And when there's a
Mm-hmm.
decrease in supply, demand goes up. Therefore, you can charge a premium for whatever that product or service is. And it's an interesting methodology that seems to get lost for small business owners because
Mm-hmm.
they start off with low prices, they get a bunch of customers, and they get really busy and they can't handle all the business, and then they start to lose the quality of the service or product that they've been giving for years.
Mm-hmm.
And what that actually does is then some of those people stop coming back and doing business with them. And so it keeps them stuck in this area where they only have a certain number of customers. But if
Mm-hmm.
they can keep the quality level of their product or service and continue to service more and more people over time, they're going to do better. Well, how do we do that? I talk to a lot of small business owners and they say, "I'd love to hire somebody, I just don't have the money for it." Well,
Heard that a
I can tell
lot.
you, I can tell you where to get the money from your customers. Your customers is where the money comes from. So that's a case where you definitely need to raise your prices. Another thing that you can do as more and more people are coming to you because you have built up a reputation of providing a really good service, there's nothing wrong with charging more for that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's cost of living increases and
Right.
minimum wages going up. That's going to have a huge effect on it. So you can always be testing the upper limit of your prices. And I think something that I had mentioned to you before is you can always raise your prices and offer discounts to your customers.
Right.
So that's actually a nice thing to do when you do have a price increase, is to immediately send an email out to all of your customers, letting them know, "Hey, this year prices are going up, but if you sign up now, we're going to honor the old price for the next year," or if you use this discount code or whatever, to help them feel a little bit better about that price increase.
How do you feel about beta testing new ideas at like a discount? I don't want to call it a discount, but at like an intro rate. I know you've done some beta testing back in the day because, software, but how do you organize that so that way when you release it to the public, that value is there?
Yeah, you always want to let everybody know the higher value of the product. So it's normally priced at this, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
giving it to you for this. So I like to do that with discount codes. So let's say
Mm,
your product is $100 and you want to test a $90 price point. Well, give a 10% coupon. And then let's
right.
say you want to test a $80 price point. So you give a 20% coupon. And you can split test this too. You can send the 10% coupons to 10 people on your email list, and you can send the 20% to another 10 people on your email list and see the difference in the responses.
And that's a very scientific method to doing that. You have your two sample sizes, you're trying two different options with that, which I think is a really great method. Now, I know you do a lot of training with current customers about retention or selling to current customers, really appreciating them. How do you, A, keep everyone straight right? Knowing who you talk to, what and what they do and all that, as well as understanding what demographic they come from. Are they one that's going to need that 20% or are they one that's going to need that 10%? I mean, how do you do it?
You're definitely going to want to tag them in your CRM, and especially when they first get entered into your CRM. So if you're using a lead form on your website, you should be able to tag anyone who fills out that lead form with whatever criteria of where they came from, or, you know, something about their personality or their demographic, whatever it is you want to capture.
I don't want to know what I'm tagged as. I don't need to know that. We'll just pretend it's something adorable. And so that way, when you want to do these testing things, you already have a place to benchmark. You don't have to be like, oh, what did Dave like again? What was Dave good at? How, I mean, especially with names like Dave, I hate to say it like that. I know like 15 Daves. So making sure you have them separated out is, I think, is super important. So when we're talking about scaling up, when you're talking about those people that work really late at night, I mean, I work at night because that's when I think the best, but most people, that's not normal. I mean, how do you go about hiring an employee? Because most business owners are more into the idea of like, okay, well, I'll just hire a contractor to start out with, you know, so there's that in between. What is your suggestion?
Well, I do like the idea of hiring an external contractor when you don't have a full-time job available. And maybe if you have like less than 20 hours a week, because if at 20 hours a week, you can hire somebody to work in your office and anywhere up from there. But if it's just 5 or 10 hours a week that you need, definitely I would go with outsourcing. But some other things to consider with outsourcing is you're paying a much higher premium. You're paying a more of a retail rate. So for in the instance of like a VA, you might be paying $20 an hour, $25 an hour, when you might be able to get somebody to work internally for $15 an hour. So when it's a full-time position, that money adds up pretty quick. Another thing about hiring internally is you really get them immersed in your company culture. And when they're external, if they're, you know, in another state and they're working remotely, it's really hard to get them to really integrate into the culture of your company and really intimately understand how you take care of your customers, because they're going to hear you on the phone with people, you know, just, you know, when they're working on some other projects. So that's kind of something that I do in my office. I require everybody to work in the office because we have a real strong culture here.
You do. And you have that immersion of being around other people. And I think it's a great learning tool because it's what we, you know, used to teach kids with, right? Is, you know, lead by example, which you are very good at as far as, you know, somebody that's a business owners. I think it's very important that we do lead by example, but they also see how you handle different situations, difficult clients, good clients. And that is a natural immersion of learning. I think that's so cool. And you always go based off of, I believe the term is called culture add. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you hire for culture add?
Yeah, I definitely focus on the personality of the person rather than their skill set. I know that it's kind of cliche to look at somebody's resume and look at, you know, what school they went to and their bachelor's degree and all that stuff. But I really focus more on their personality. And when I'm doing the interview, I try to ask questions that they wouldn't have thought of that they would be asked in an interview, because, hey, let's face it, we're all savvy these days. Before you go on an interview, you can Google what are the top 10 interview questions and what are the top 10 best ways to answer them. And they can come in and they can just, you know, parrot these answers, and it's not really coming from their own consciousness. So I like to throw them, you know, curveball questions.
Hit me with one. Give me one. I want one.
Great questions is, what do you do in the morning to prepare yourself to be effective when you come to work?
Oh, that's an awesome question. Do you want me to answer it?
Sure.
I have coffee with our HR department, which is a dog. And I watch something kind of mindless like Robot Chicken or something like that makes me laugh. And then I start with a good mood because I'm awake. I've had cuddles from puppies, which who doesn't like puppy cuddles? And Robot Chicken is hilarious. And I have a good mood. So how'd I do? Did you hire me?
I would totally hire you. And that's because you were talking about mindset, right? And what's interesting, I have asked this question to at least 20 different interviewees. And you'd be surprised the people that say, well, I set my alarm clock, I take a shower, I have breakfast, and then I come to work. That
Okay.
doesn't answer the question.
No.
Doesn't answer the question. So that's why I like the way you responded to that, because you were telling me how you get your mindset ready so you can come to
Mhm.
work with energy and excitement and ready to go.
Yeah, well, we also have very similar personality types. So I don't know if that really counts because we get along anyways. So no, that's really great advice to have those random curveball questions for an interview because I mean, hiring is very scary. And it's very scary for a lot of business owners, I think, because we have to consider, oh my gosh, when I hire somebody, I have to have this kind of insurance. I have to have workers' comp. What if they break a toe? You know, all of that kind of concern. How does that really factor into hiring somebody for those 40 hours you were saying versus just relying on an independent contractor who you know has their own insurance?
Yeah, you would think that it's a really, really big deal. And I was really afraid to hire my first person many years ago. But once I finally did it, I found out that there are processes and procedures in place. There's
Mhm.
insurance companies you can talk to, there's tax forms that can be filled out to figure out exactly how much you need to be deducting. And usually your
Right.
accountant will do that for you anyway at a minimal charge. So, really, the cost of ownership of an employee is really pretty low. I usually factor about 15 to 20% over what I'm paying them as
Okay.
my cost of employment. And it's just not that bad. One thing that's really important is understanding how to fire and how to discipline.
Mm,
So you
yeah.
have to have a good, strong company handbook. And of course, there's templates online. You can start your handbook from there that outline all of the standards that you expect from their employment as far as like what time they're going to arrive, what your late policy is,
Hmm.
drugs and alcohol, different things like that, that you have to really like think ahead on these things. And then that way, if there's an infraction, you have something to refer back to. And
Hmm.
it's a real simple process. You just write up the infraction and you have them sign it and you discuss it with them. And if that happens 3 times, the third time they're going to be terminated. It's actually
Right.
pretty simple. The advice is to hire fast and fire even faster.
Mm,
So I do want to take the time in the interview to make sure I'm getting the right person for the job, because you don't want to go through the firing process. But
no.
once you do hire them and you discover that they are not the right person, give them those opportunities to correct the behavior. But if they're not doing it, you can't let them continue to stay in the team and
Hmm.
fester and create like a cancer in your company where
Right.
other people start to get infected and they go, well, how come he gets to come in late all the time? The
Right.
the manager doesn't seem to care. So I guess I'm going to start showing up late. You don't
Right.
want that infectious attitude to creep through everybody. So you got to fire fast as well.
Now, I know that I'm not great at this because A, I'm afraid of like doing things wrong on forms in the government. But what is your understanding of tax law of like hiring somebody versus a contractor and how they sometimes can be the same thing? It's really scary.
Yeah, it is difficult. But really, there's three main points that the IRS looks at. One is that if you have complete control over their activities on a day-to-day basis or an hour-to-hour basis, that they would probably be classified as an employee. Another thing is if they have an actual business entity of their own with their own tax ID, and they're actually servicing other people besides just you and your company, that would be
Hmm.
another indication that they have a legitimate independent contractor status as opposed to being an employee.
That's really helpful to know because I know there's a lot of gray area and misunderstandings. And I mean, I'm one of those where it's safer to hire this person, right? As like an independent contractor, but then you find out, oh my gosh, they only work for me. And yeah, it gets really, really crazy really fast. But another question that I've heard people talk about and ask is, when should I get a business loan? Should I do it to, keep my doors open, or I've got this order coming in, I need to buy more of X, Y, and Z widget. Give us some advice. Tell us anything. I will take it because I don't know what to say.
Well, I would say it's kind of like a situation where you have a sure expectation that things are going to go well. You just need a little bit of oomph to make it happen. That's where
Right.
a loan makes sense. So either a business loan, or a lot of people use credit cards.
Hmm.
That can be a viable way to deliver product to somebody who has placed an order with you with an assured expectation that they're going to make the purchase. But really better than that would be to have them fund it for you by requiring some kind of a down payment or a deposit, or, they pay in full and then they receive the product later. But in some cases, you might be put on a net 30, and that would be a case where you have to float the amount. And so that's where I would use a business loan. Sometimes I talk to business owners who think that the government just hands out free money as a business loan, which is not usually the case. They talk about the SBA and all that, but the loans are typically going to be backed by a real tangible asset, just like any other loan would. So you're putting up your house, or you're putting up your car or your retirement fund or something like that. So it's not going to be just free money that's given to you for a business idea that you have. It has to be something tangible.
So what do you think about a lot of people that are trying to figure out this whole pandemic, loans that they're giving to businesses to keep their employees? Is that kind of the same thing you're talking about, or is that a separate idea?
I really like what the government has done to help businesses, because they're giving away a lot of grant money. Even local municipalities are giving away grant money. And this is money that doesn't have to be paid back, but it is expected to be used to continue to have the business in operation. It's not something you're supposed to put into your own pocket. Then we also have the PPP loans. There's 1.0 and 2.0. Those are both forgivable loans, which basically turns them into a grant. So that, again, I think that's totally fine, especially if it can help you to get through this period. The way to look at it, though, is if your business was barely hanging on, you were barely viable before COVID, chances are if COVID never happened, you may have went out of business, then you're really just prolonging the inevitable if you're taking this grant money, which doesn't mean you can't do it, but you really want to kind of take a look at that. Now, there are also some government-funded loans that do require payback. And so that's where I would really think about it seriously. Are you just kicking the can further down the road, or is this really going to lead to success in your business? And that's where I've seen a lot of really interesting things that business owners are doing in pivoting, taking the current situation and finding a new twist to it so that they can be viable. My favorite example is a clown client that I was working with, an actual clown that would entertain children. And when this happened, she said, I'm not allowed to be around children anymore. I can't be a clown anymore. Like, what am I going to do with my livelihood? So we chatted about it a little bit, and we came up with the idea of doing Zoom clown parties with the children for their birthdays and those kinds of things.
That's so cute. It was
super fun. And it was really, really cool. She took pictures of her doing this and she posted them on social media. And other parents were saying, oh, great, I can entertain the kids and I can get some peace because the kids are stuck in the house now, right? So it's like, I could just get some peace for an hour. How much do you charge per hour? So she built a whole business out of being a virtual clown. So there are ways.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And we kind of did a similar thing. We couldn't go in person anymore in film. So we built our online class to teach people how to do what I do on the professional level. So that way their business, looks good online. Because, we're just talking about it. Zoom is what we're using to communicate, and, having good shot really matters, which of course, because you've done this industry, your background looks great, little jello on the inside, but obviously you have this wealth of knowledge. If people want to learn more from you beyond my podcast situation here, how do they do that?
Yeah, there's plenty more videos to watch. What I did is I started a YouTube channel. It's called Dave Talks Business. And what you can do is go there, and I've got a bunch of just little 10-minute videos on a range of different topics about starting your business, about working with employees, and all the different things that are going to come along in your business. So if you just go to YouTube, Dave Talks Business, consider subscribing. It would really help me out.
Yeah, I would love that. I'm already a subscriber, so I don't know if that really counts, but please go and subscribe. It's a free opportunity to get more information from Dave and all of his information that he has going on. And also really remember that he is an introvert and he got out there to benefit you. So that's really a huge sacrifice on our end to be there for you. So please do subscribe, check out what he's got going on. And, if somebody wants to either hire you as a speaker or work with you, how do they move forward?
My website is davetalksbusiness.com.
And that's where you can look at the sizzle reel we were talking about earlier as well. So Dave, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Great seeing you again.
And everyone, that was Influencing on Camera, the podcast.